Hi, I'm Old Norse Specialist Dr. Jackson Crawford. I teach Old Norse and related subjects at the University of Colorado Boulder, previously at UC Berkeley and UCLA. Over 11 years of teaching subjects such as Norse mythology at various universities in the United States, with a couple off periods, I have returned to certain central concepts that I try to emphasize in my teaching, as well as in these video presentations that I make and in my translations of Norse myth. And one of those concepts is what I call forced solutions. And this runs throughout myth. This isn't just Norse mythology. This is something that you see in mythology all around the world. Now, in this presentation, which I want to make about this concept, keep a couple things in mind. One is that this is a fairly informal presentation. I'm just sort of off the cuff talking about something that I lecture about here and there, but I've never given one single coherent lecture about. And also keep in mind that when I say mythology, I am not making a comment about the truth value of the story. By mythology, I mean any kind of narrative that involves some kind of supernatural or deific being. That can be a hero, it can be a god, it can be trickster figures in some traditions that don't easily fit into any of these categories. But for example, you can believe in Christian scripture and speak of Christian mythology. That does not mean that you don't believe, for example, in the literal truth of something Jesus Christ did or said, but that the story about him doing it is mythology. It's a narrative about a deity. Okay, so this thing about forced solutions, what I mean is the problems that come up in mythology for the figures that we meet there, gods or heroes, are often sort of sympathetic. We understand why the protagonist wants to avoid a certain thing, wants to kill a certain enemy, etc. But the exact solution often has nothing to do with how we would reason our way through this problem should we be encountered with an equivalent problem. So one example from Norse mythology that leaps to mind is with the death of Balder. Now Balder is this beautiful being that nobody wants to die, and everyone apparently agrees that he should not die, except Loki, but that comes up later. And Frigg, his mother, goes around and asks every single thing to swear never to harm Balder, and she succeeds. Stone, trees, mountains, the sky, everything swears that it will never harm Balder. Now, this is an odd solution to a sort of understandable problem. Of course, as people that all of us wish wouldn't die or wish hadn't died. But the solution is, it's odd, and it's never used anywhere else. That's another thing about forced solutions. They tend to be unique to that situation. So, for example, we don't want Balder to die, but we also presumably don't want Thor to die, right? He is loved by everyone on the good side of things, and he is a protector of humankind as well as of the gods. But no one ever asks everything to swear not to harm Thor. Now, Thor might have enemies among the giants. They might not swear not to harm him, but presumably you could at least get lots of other things to swear not to harm him, and that would be good insurance for Thor. Even if we subscribe to the notion that his fate is prescribed at Ragnarok, he's going to be killed by Midgardsormr after killing Midgardsormr. The gods never seem to mind a little extra insurance. Odin is always trying to prevent his death at Ragnarok one way or another. So why not do it for Thor? Why is it that this only comes up for Balder? Okay, Balder is killed, and of course there's often a loophole to the forced solution, and in this case the loophole is that Frigg didn't ask absolutely everything not to harm Balder. She didn't ask mistletoe. Why? Kind of a forced excuse. Mistletoe was too young to swear the oath. There's a little bit of a motif in Norse mythology, things being too young to swear an oath and then being used to break the oath. For example, Gunnar and Hogni don't want to break their oath of blood brotherhood with their blood brother Sigurdur and the Volsung material, and so they get their brother Guttormr to do it. Of course, Guttormr was too young to swear blood brotherhood with Sigurdur when they did. All right, so Balder's killed, and it is Loki who makes Hother do this, and I've explored all this in more detail, this particular story, in my video about the death of Balder. So see that if you're not familiar with the story. All right, so with the death of Balder, Odin, another figure on the side of good, someone we're supposed to sympathize with, is in another sympathetic problem. We have a father who wants vengeance for his son. Now, I understand why it's not Odin himself who is going to seek the vengeance, because Hother is going to be the object of the vengeance, and he is Odin's son too. Of course, people sometimes today are a little bit perplexed by why Hother is the object of vengeance, not Loki right away. I think that may have to do with the origin of the story, where Loki probably didn't have a role originally. But that's something that I've discussed in the video about the death of Balder, and this isn't really about that myth. But, okay, he wants to father a son who can avenge this son. Okay, why can't he father that son on his wife, Frigg? Why can't he father that son on one of the powerful giant women that he fathered other gods on? So, for example, he fathered Thor on Jor. He fathered Vidar on Gridr. Why can't he go back to one of these giant women? Why can't he go to his own wife? Why does he have to seek out the specific woman, Rindr, in order to father Voli to avenge Balder? Forced solution, right? But he goes through all kinds of hoops to solve this problem. According to the story as told by Saxo, Odin goes through 3 disguises trying to get close to Rindr in order to impregnate her, and finally does so after a lot of trouble. Why does it have to be this woman? It just does. It's a forced solution. And then, why is it that, according to Völuspá, Voli is 1 night old when he avenges Balder on Hother? Okay, we understand that we want vengeance for Balder fast, but why does it have to be so? But if he can already fight and kill somebody when he's 1 night old, why not 1 minute old, right? Whatever magic, whatever solution is making him able to fight when he's so young, why couldn't it be used even earlier? Forced solution. Okay, so these 4 solutions remind me of a couple phenomena, and one phenomenon, of course, that I'm strongly reminded of is dreaming. I have a dream, not a recurring dream in case you start worrying about my psyche, where I'm being chased around university campus, which one specifically varies on the dream and the period of my life, by some kind of enemy. Sometimes it's kind of a dragon figure, sometimes it's like a large tiger or something like that. Whatever, it's a dream. The monster changes sometimes in the dream. I'm running around on campus, running away from this thing. And I'm trying to get to my truck. And it's not like the campus is empty. Everybody else is there, right? There's tens of thousands of people walking around trying to get to their classes. The monster isn't going after any of them. It's going after me, and there's no particularly logical reason for it to. But I'm also trying to get to my truck. I'm passing lots of other buildings. I'm passing moving vehicles that I can maybe jump onto, right? I'm passing trees I could maybe climb up, walls I could maybe climb up to get away from this monster. But I'm seeking one particular solution the dream is forcing on me, and that is get to my truck, right? There's no reason for it, but that's just the way the dream has set me up. Sometimes it seems like it's just the first thing that occurs to you in a dream is the thing that's sort of the most primitively satisfying. And of course, to be among one's own thing or to be in one's own place, that's more satisfying maybe than going to a stranger's place. But you're being pursued by a monster that wants to kill you. All right, why? No reason. It's dream logic. I'm also reminded a little bit of situations that dungeon masters get into in running role-playing games. So for those of you not in that culture, I suspect many of you are, the dungeon master is the person who controls the world that the people in a role-playing game like Dungeons and Dragons are playing in. So you have, 3 people who are playing, one of them is playing a fighter, one's a wizard, one's a thief or something. And the dungeon master decides, hey, I want these people to eventually find themselves in this city, and I want them to fight this big enemy that I've set up. I've got a cool story for them in this city, but I need to get them to this city. I need to get them to fight this enemy. And I really want the fighter to use this cool sword or some other magic item. Let's say a magic sword that I found for him in this previous adventure. But the players keep defying the dungeon master's plan, right? He puts them at a crossroads. has some cryptic old man saying, "Oh, you should take the road to the west," which is the way that the city that the Dungeon Master has set up is. But the players end up going east. They don't trust the old man. They think he's a demon in disguise. When they finally do get to the city, because the Dungeon Master somehow forces them to, they're abducted by an airship that drops them off at the city, then they don't want to fight this particular bad guy. They don't care about him. They don't remember him from a previous encounter or previous hints about him. But the Dungeon Master, has this bad guy break down their door just to fight them. And then the wizard comes up with some magical solution to defeat the enemy. But the Dungeon Master doesn't want that. He wants the warrior to use this cool sword because he wants to have some cool effect happen that the warrior doesn't know about when he uses the sword on this enemy. Maybe he's undead and the sword has some cool undead fighting ability. And he forces the mage to suddenly be subdued by some ally of this great enemy that we didn't even know existed. Okay, sometimes, basically, the plot, as it were, of a myth reminds me of a dungeon master trying to railroad his players that way, right? I've got this idea in my head of how this is going to end, and by God, it's going to end this way. I don't care what you try to do. And, of course, the way that sort of magical solutions work is also very reminiscent of role-playing games like that. And, of course, role-playing games like Dungeons & Dragons borrow a lot deliberately from the way, from specific narratives of myth, but it's interesting how they borrow from the structure of myth and the way that magic often is set up as having some kind of, as solving some kind of problem in a powerful way, but in a weird, unexpected way with loopholes, right? Magic is never going to be a solution that just works by simply turning off a problem or simply, immediately deleting an enemy from existence. There's always going to be some kind of long process. There's going to be components that have to be gathered. There's going to be some particular thing about the enemy that's going to be targeted by the spell, maybe, and then it can be surprising if the Dungeon Master has the idea that he wants to see the mage, use just as cantrips or something. He might have the mage end up saving everybody by using feather fall or something, just by having the enemy fall, having the mage stop him from falling, and then he's hit by some aerial ally of our players. I'm probably stretching this Dungeons & Dragons metaphor too far, but I am reminded of the railroading Dungeon Master. Just like a dream, the Dungeon Master and the myth has an idea of what the solution is, and it's going to get the characters there. All right, let's look at another story, another myth that has a forced solution problem, because these aren't just about gods. In the saga of the Volsungs, which I've summarized in a series of videos a few months ago, and of course, which I translated recently, and I hope you'll check that out if you haven't yet. There is a scene where Volsung, a powerful king, has visited his daughter Signy in the kingdom where she's moved with her husband Siggeir. And Siggeir has ambushed Volsung and all of his sons. He's killed Volsung, and he's chained up his 9 sons, including the oldest, Sigmund, who is Signy's twin. And okay, here we have our sympathetic problem. Thinking of Signy as the protagonist here, she's got several brothers that she wants to rescue. How can she do it? Well, there might be a few, what would you do? Think about that for a moment. Well, she ends up asking her husband Siggeir to kill them as slowly as possible. She says that the eye loves what it lingers on, and that she wants to look at her brothers longer, so kill them slow. And so Siggeir says, well, my mom, who's a wolf, because why not, right? My mom, who's a wolf, will eat one of them every night till they're all dead. So, of course, for the next 8 nights, this wolf eats each one of her brothers in turn, leaving only Sigmund, the oldest, alive. Okay, so now our sympathetic problem has been sharpened, it's been emphasized, it's even worse. It's been terribly exacerbated because, there's only one brother left. How can she save him? Well, what would you do? Okay, here's her solution. She asked one of her slaves to go out to her brother Sigmund, where he's chained to a tree trunk, awaiting the wolf who will eat him in the night, and cover him with honey, and then fill his mouth with honey. And the slave says, of course, right? I mean, this is the logical solution to this problem. The slave goes out, covers Sigmund with honey, fills his mouth with honey, and Sigmund seems to just understand what's expected. And sure enough, the wolf comes by, licks up all the honey on his body instead of just eating him directly. She's tempted by the sweet honey. And then she sticks her tongue into his mouth to lick up the rest of the honey that's in there. And that's when Sigmund, in the middle of this French kiss with the wolf, bites down on the tongue, and the wolf, struggling against him, breaks him out of his chains, and then he was able to wrestle and kill the wolf. Now, this is a pretty extreme force solution. There's easier solutions that suggest themselves if you're trying to rescue your brother from being eaten by a wolf. Like perhaps, why not send somebody out with an axe or a pickaxe or something to pick at the chains or fetters, whatever exactly are holding him to the trunk. There's much easier solutions you could conceive. Why not try to kill the wolf directly yourself before it can go kill Sigmund? The honey thing is ludicrous in a way, which isn't me making fun of the story. It's me saying that in a logical sense, today, if this were a problem you had, and I hope it isn't, would covering your brother with honey come to mind? Likely not. It's just like the dream, where I've got to reach my truck when this other solution's available, but I'm running for my truck. So keep in mind in reading myths that they are structured not in the way that a modern novel is, where we expect one thing to lead to another, where we expect at the beginning, if somebody is mentioned and he seems a little bit suspicious, we expect that that's not a red herring. Sometimes in myth, we do have the most bizarre things just come up out of nowhere, just a deus ex machina sort of. To a certain extent, the honey is like a deus ex machina. Where did all that honey come from anyway? I mean, somebody was storing a lot of honey in order to cover a grown man in it. It's someone, you could argue, fate or the Norns has a solution in mind, an end in mind, and by God, the means are going to reach that end, no matter what you would reason through if you oppose the problem yourself in your actual daily life. I hope this has been somewhat coherent. It's a little bit more of a casual, informal presentation. Just some stories and ideas I wanted to share. And from beautiful Colorado, I'm wishing you all the best.